ancient biblical prophets wrote about the future. Today, theologians are poring over those scriptures with a firm belief that their prophecies are coming to pass. Journey now into the world of eschatology on Prophecy in the News with author and lecturer J.R. Church.
On today's Prophecy in the News, we're going to talk about fractals. And we have that as our cover story in the January edition of Prophecy in the News magazine, Fractals, the Intelligence of God's Design. Now, we pose the question, is creation a series of divine algorithms? By asking this question, we're not trying to cheapen God's creation. Gary Stimman is here to discuss what I think is one of the most absolutely fascinating discoveries of the 20th century, fractal design.
Without a doubt, whether you know it or not, fractals have changed your life. When you watch television, when you look at certain kinds of pictures, when computer-generated ideas are presented to you, invariably fractals are involved in the process. A fractal, JR, was the invention of a mathematician by the name of Benoit Mandelbrot. In 1975, he wrote a book called Fractals, Form, Chance, and Dimension, in which he essentially publicized some relatively simple mathematical formulas which generated shapes that repeated themselves on an infinite basis. And I'm sure that many of you know what we're talking about. We'll be showing you various pictures of fractal designs as we go through this program. JR, God's creation. I think Benoit Mandelbrot may have pointed us in the direction, in a very remote way, in the direction of God's creation.
This is Mandelbrot's primary design. You can see it here. It looks sort of like a beetle. The point of this fractal is that if you go with a microscope down to the smallest part of this fractal design, you can see that the smallest part is identical to the whole. Mm-hmm. So no matter how small you get, the algorithm that was used in the computer that made that shows how simple it was. A simple mathematical geometric algorithm created that incredible design.
Now, you just used a big word, and a lot of people out there say, what did JR say? Algorithm? What do we mean by algorithm? You know, JR, that's just basically a $16 word for an instruction. Mm-hmm. An algorithm is just a little instructional package. You can write some numbers and characters and enter those in a computer, and it tells the computer what to do. So an algorithm is a set of instructions, or a very small instruction.
Now, we've got, under Mandelbrot's picture here, we've zoomed in to show you the complexity of it, and yet such a simple algorithm caused the computer to do that. Anyway, underneath this picture, numbers, this is what happens. And he goes through this little algorithm here, and he said the computer can do these calculations at a very rapid pace. Isn't that amazing? Just put in a simple algorithm, and the computer builds it.
Yeah, and the point is not that you understand those numbers, because basically there are very few of us who have studied higher math. The point is that it's a relatively simple formula, and the dictionary definition reflects this idea. The Oxford American Dictionary defines a fractal as a curve or geometric figure, each part of which has the same character as the whole. Fractals are useful in modeling structures, such as eroded coastlines or snowflakes. The Encarta World English Dictionary defines a fractal as an irregular or fragmented geometric shape that can be repeatedly subdivided into parts, each of which is a smaller copy of the whole. So you have something that can grow infinitely large or infinitesimally small, and it doesn't change. It remains the same.
Now, the reason we're excited about fractals is that in 1623, Galileo said, quote, "Philosophy is written in this grand book, I mean, the universe, which stands continuously open to our gaze, but it cannot be understood unless one first learns to comprehend the language in which it is written. It is written in the language of mathematics, and its characters are triangles, circles, and other geometric figures, without which it is humanly impossible to understand a single word of it. Without these, one is wandering about in a dark labyrinth." This was 1623. He is saying here that the universe is made up of simple algorithms, fractal designs. Now, please understand, we're not trying to cheapen creation here, but what we are saying is, when God created the universe, He simply used 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet to make all of this grand design. Just simple algorithms could build it all.
And J.R., the Jews before Christ used to talk about the Word, and the Word of creation. And they said that God spoke creation into existence with the Word. And a simple Galilean fisherman by the name of John talked about the Word as the creative device. And then he said in John 1:14, and the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. In other words, J.R., couldn't we call the Word an algorithm? And couldn't we call the flesh the result of the algorithm?
You know, it was the Greek philosophers who said that the world is not real, that it is a made-up something, that just a product of imagination. What he was trying to say, I think, is that it's software. It's not hardware.
Yeah.
Now, mankind does not have the machine that builds electrons, protons, neutrons, etc., and atoms. We can't build these things. God did. God has some kind of a device by which, and I don't mean to belittle God's ability to create out of nothing. That's exactly what He did, however, and He spoke it into existence. It is software. In fact, the rabbi's going to say that if the Lord ever turned off the switch or stopped speaking these things and holding them together, they would immediately evaporate.
That is absolutely true. And by the way, that's reflected in the first chapter of the book of Hebrews, as well as the first chapter of the book of John, both of which assert that this universe was created out of nothing and is upheld by the Word of God. And so rather than simplifying God by likening these fractals or showing how fractal design actually created our physical world, we are glorifying God. You know, fractal design, J.R., is a way for us human beings to perceive a design parameter. And every time I look at these things, I think how beautiful and clever God was in His design.
Yeah. Here's a head of broccoli, and you'll see the spiral design on the large areas of the head, and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller as it goes out toward the end. But those smaller things are just as perfect as these larger details. And this is the beauty of a fractal design.
Yeah, and J.R., and I will have that on the screen for you as we speak, and the beauty of this little infant, I guess, this little sprout of broccoli, is that it looks artificial. I mean, you could almost say to somebody, I designed this on the computer. And they wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Well, that's the amazing thing. This repetitive design motif is what you're looking at when you go outdoors. You see trees, you see flowers that have regularity, you see branching trees. Those are fractals, and that's amazing.
Now, scientists, once Benoit Mandelbrot produced his theory, scientists began to toy with it in a computer, and finally they got together and had symposiums over this, and Hollywood caught hold of it. And the designs of movies inside computers became possible. We're talking only in the last, 25, 30 years?
Well, it was 1982. There was a hallmark in history. For those of you who are film fans, there was a sci-fi movie called Tron. And I think a lot of kids, and some of them have grown up, and they would be 25 to 30 years old today, maybe a little over 30. And they remember a computer world built. And the idea of the film called Tron is that inside this computer, there was